I'm a volunteer supporting our local candidates here in Sefton Council. A few of us here organising it are volunteers who have been roped in the last few weeks. Yes. Thank you so much for coming. It's great to see you here this evening. I'm sure maybe some of you, because of the weather, it's been a scorcher, hasn't it? You could be having barbecues or watching, I don't know whether there's football on tonight, is there? You know, there is. Well, England played last night, we won't talk about that one, okay? And you could just remind people to put your phones on silent, please, or airplane mode, or switch off. That would be great for the duration. We aim to finish about no later than 8 o'clock. And okay, so firstly, a bit of health and safety. I just need campaigning. So Nagender Chindam, NG for short, you can all call him NG. He is our Reform candidate for Sefton Central, which covers Formby, Hightown, Ainsdale, Crosby, Maghull and Lydiate. NG is a first-generation immigrant, originally from India. His background is 20 years in IT, and in the last 5 years as a small business owner in Southport. He loves this country and he's passionate about giving something back. There will be time at the end of the whole, when all the speakers are finished, there will be time for a Q&A. So make your notes, or if you've got anything, you think of anything along the way. So please give a warm welcome to our first speaker, NG.
Where do I start? So we had 92 registrations on Wednesday night, which is great, and you coming here on a weekday is really appreciated. So that shows your passion. Thank you so much for all of you. I'll start with my humble beginnings. Basically, my father was a cable operator on going pole to pole telephone lines. He's not a tool maker. And my father-in-law is not a billionaire, which was my mistake. Okay, so that's a big beginnings. People ask me why reform. Well, it's a common sense, simple question. People don't get it. I don't understand why they ask me why reform. Because for me, if I am living here for 15 years, I'm raising my kids, I made my life here. I want a beautiful home and breathing a fresh air in England. So it's my responsibility, or it's my common sense, to love a country where I live. So when people ask why reform, it's a strange question to me. And many of online commenters thinks, why reform this guy? When leadership interviewed me, all they checked was, all I told was, I respect British values, I respect British culture. That's how I convinced them. That's how they chosen me as a candidate. Why I am telling this? Because people say reform is a far right. That's absolutely incorrect. Reform is a right party, not the wrong ones. So that's why reform. Well, I wanted to speak out my heart when in sessions like this. Again, the Britain needs to be saved. That's the tagline, I think. Save Britain. The reason is when Black African become President of America, it's great. It's great news for me, everyone. But when you talk about a normal white guy on the streets, you will be tagged as a racist, which I don't accept. If you are talking about equality, just don't tag anyone as racist if they are talking about their culture or a guy from the road. So basically, it's great either way. So we need to speak up. We need to be vocal if we are talking about real equality. Respect everyone. I think that's That's what the Reform Party is about. And I see in UK, there are a lot of people struggling for housing. I think most of us accept, especially young people. Forget about the backgrounds, but the people who worked hard in colleges, schools, trying to find a normal job are struggling. And I've seen a lot of people becoming homelessness. And I saw a lady who is local from Merseyside. She has nowhere to go. This is her country. No other opportunity to go anywhere else. She came to me and asking for, can you spare a pound? That's where the Britain is. It's in a worst position. And 14 years of conservatives, our country gone down, down, down. And you're all here because I'm sure you're all passionate about Britain and it's not going in the right direction. And this two-party system literally failed our country. We need a third one. Because we need a vibrant democracy. People can go out, stand up, courageous enough to speak out. Because after all, we have got a right to speech in this country. This is a democracy. But a lot of people hesitate, supporting reform silently. A lot of people don't want to put boards as others do, labour boards everywhere in Sefton Central. A lot of people supporting me, but not openly. But that things will change, I guess. Now, we had 14 years of misery, pain, and labour in Sefton Central. So, I guess you all know your MP? Yes, guys, please. You know your MP. I don't mind whether you're Labour supporter, Conservative supporter, or very loyal for generations to generations. It's not about the parties, it's about the country now. So, if you love a party, vote for party. But if you love a country, vote for change. Vote for people courageous enough to stand up. Because we get a lot of things online. So vote for change, vote for reform. So when I say 14 years of labour and pain, the words goes well together. And the rising bills, and you had 14 years of billlessness. The rising bills has ruined Northwest, Sefton Central. Go to Crosby, go to Southport, go to any high street. Have you noticed the doors are closed? Have you noticed people are struggling? Have you noticed weed and a lot of unwanted things? So the 14 years is enough. Enough is enough of labour in Sefton Central and Conservatives in Westminster. And today's poll, I think Nick, my colleague, is standing as MP as well. We are all very happy, and the prediction is 18 MPs for reform. So Nigel, so prediction is 18. 2 weeks ago, 6. 4 weeks ago, 0. 2 weeks after, I would say 50 plus. And one should be the Sefton Central with all your support.
All right.
The reason Sefton Central, I would like to available myself to everyone in constituency, whether if I win, whether Labour voter, doesn't matter, but it's constituency matter then. I would work on key issues, NHS wait times, 9 months for some sort of appointments, and 9 years for one sort of surgery. A lady was giving an interview. That's where UK is. So if my loyalty lies in UK, I should stand up or work for it honestly, day in, day out. And if I get elected, I'll promise 100% I'll give my 100% to work every day of 5 years in Sefton Central. Now, 2014, I think 2019 we had elections. Now, 2024 elections is crucial. Reform wasn't there in 2019 and Conservatives got clear way. And you all know what they did. We are getting a lot of Conservatives who are turning into Reform, and recently a lot of Labour friends turning to Reform as well, which is a good sign. But 2024 election, for me, I spoke about homelessness in England. It's a lot of young people struggling. It comes from my heart. So 2024 elections, homelessness versus the rich political class. This election is about working class versus out of touch political class. The rich energy companies versus a common people. When I say rich energy companies, have you read? Energy companies made a lot of profit. Haven't we struggled? Every person, whether you're rich enough, middle class, or in a poverty, we all struggled with energy bills. Every business has struggled with it. Then how come these energy companies made a lot of money? Which is strange, because it's a lack of power in government. They did not manage it well. That's why energy companies versus common, normal person in UK. And empty high street versus ignorant political class. I keep saying political class because Reform, we are more treating ourselves as a working class. Like Link, myself, a lot of other colleagues are doing daytime works to live and also trying to win an election. So that's why it's a working class versus elite labor class. And there are a lot of benefits or basically the good things announced by Nigel, like no tax up to 20k, which helps a lot of people, a lot of youngsters who's just starting the job, can save the tax. And small businesses, no business rates, which is again, a lot of people ask, how do you pay these? But no business rates, but 4% surcharge for multi-billion online businesses. So that makes sense to me, to support small businesses. Because small businesses provides 75% of UK employment, which is a great deal. And again, streamline NHS, bring back 0 waiting times. So there are a lot of promises which we'll come back to when you ask questions. But this is where I am standing. I hope you support Reform UK in 2024. And next 7 days are very crucial, very, very crucial. If any one of you come forward for helping us in leaflets or anything you could do for that matter. So we have an 83-year-old person from Ainsdale supporting us, which is great. And we got Maria, Janet, a lot of things. Inspired, she's suffering from cancer, but they kept everything away because the country is important. One lady wrote me an email saying, I don't know her age, but I can imagine. She said, will this country be back on track? I think I'm telling to Nick, take it up to leadership. She said, before I die, do something. This is a single line. So this is very emotional for myself. So to see that kind of events, and I'm here to do something as well, along with my colleagues. And for me, I've got 6 things close to my heart. More than the party has got many things. I've written down in my leaflets. I hope you'll read it in free time. But 2 key things. Everyone talks about cost of living. Yes, struggling. Immigration, it should be smart. It should add a value to country. And people here should respect the values of this country. As simple as that. Not asking much more. If you are in line, a lot of people respect you here. I've never had a problem in the last 15 years. NHS was great, but it's no more, unfortunately. Schools, lots of things happening in schools. Again, Reform is the only party courageous enough to talk what needs to be corrected. None of the other parties worries because they are after votes. Reform is a common sense party. That's why it's gaining support, which is important. People believe in honesty. I believe people votes for honesty and hard work more than Labour spending millions of pounds on Facebook. Just paying Facebook. Facebook doesn't even pay proper taxes in UK. Reform is the only party not paying. In a graph, if you look at the Sky News, Reform is the only party organically grown online in just last 4 weeks. So the first graph shows you how much money spent by each party. The Labour is there, top. Conservatives and then Liberals, I think the Reform is last. Then if you look at the second graph, fortunately media is covering this and they are not biased sometimes. In the second graph, Reform organically, most people interacted online is a Reform top. And the least is the regular parties. So that tells what's happening in this country. I hope you guys are happy for being here today, honestly. My 2 key other issues are farmers. I spoke to so many farmers, they're struggling because they don't decide the price, supermarkets decide. Government somehow given up on them. It's working, don't mess around. No, it's not working. People are struggling. You need to pull up your sleeves if you're in government or elected representatives. Understand the problems. Who need to decide the prices? Just understand if the farmers give up in this country, we have no milk on the door. We don't have food on the table. No happiness in dining room. It's as simple as that. I'm not a farmer, but it takes common sense to understand. Doesn't it, guys? The next one. Veterans. I used to run a small cafe in Southport. We used to do some Tuesdays or Mondays. All veterans, £1 coffee. I used to get 20, 30 people coming. Sometimes we just said don't pay because at the end of the day, we're spending half day taking 20 quid from them. So, not so great. So I said no, today, not today. 2, 3 guys walking and said, God bless you. That blessing probably I might be standing here today. The guys blessed me and I've shared little conversations with them. They are struggling. The people who protected you, me, our kids, day and night, so we sleep happily here, live happily here, and they are in the borders, securing it. Secured it and they put their life online. I am not a veteran, I don't have, maybe my ancestors, maybe. But again, takes common sense. You need to pay them well. Put them back on nice advisory roles. you need to give them a respect, then the country prospers. Little things like if moral things. If you are standing on a right moral grounds, the country will prosper. I think that's all, guys. That's all from me. Thanks so much for coming.
Time at the end of our session of questions. So let's move things on and welcome to the stage our second speaker, Andrew Lynn, Southport constituency. He's a third generation sandgrounder, which is a new word to me. His grandparents having moved to Birkdale after World War II. He studied literature to doctorate level, spent time as a university lecturer, has had published books on philosophy as well as many legal articles. Andrew decided his future lay in law and holds an LLM in international dispute resolution. He's lived and worked extensively both in the UK and overseas, and if that was not a challenging enough life, he has 3 young boys, including twins. Anyway, you're not here to discuss.
Good evening. I am Andrew Lynn, the Southport candidate for Reform UK. Reform UK is a political party and a movement championing British interests through common sense policies aimed at protecting and promoting our common prosperity, safety and security, democracy, territorial integrity, constitution and culture. We are attempting to correct the harm that has been done to our country in the last quarter century by the repeated betrayals of all 3 establishment parties. It's time to accept that the old allegiances are dead. Labour holds working people in contempt. The Conservatives have conserved nothing, and the Lib Dems show little understanding of or appreciation for liberal democracy. All 3 have become merely power-seeking vessels, captured by vested interests and careerist politicians. What then is our mission in Reform UK? For me, I would summarise it in this way. It is to revitalise British politics. The 3 major parties have pursued a common agenda of high tax, big state, open borders, globalism, that only serve the interest of big corporations, political and social elites, and vested interests. We offer something different, a common sense politics for the ordinary and sometimes the extraordinary British people. I'm going to introduce now some of our major policies so that you understand broadly what Reform UK is focusing on in this election and going forward. First of all, we intend to solve the cost of living crisis. As Nagender has explained, people are struggling out there. But we don't believe that the answer is to pay more tax so the government can then arrange for more schemes that the government thinks will help people. That's a Labour ideology. We believe that the government should take less from the working people. And where we differ from the Tories is we believe that we should focus on taking less from the lower and middle income earners. So we would raise the personal allowance so that there would be no tax to pay on the first £20,000 of your income. It's really ridiculous, isn't it, that you would pay any tax on the first one. If you're earning less than £20,000, you need all that money. There isn't going to be a way you're going to live comfortably in this country on less than £20,000. So one of the first steps we would take is to raise the personal allowance to £20,000. We would also raise the point at which you would pay the higher rate of tax to £70,000. This would help the middle income category of earners. We would scrap business rates for high street, small and medium-sized enterprises. We would free small and medium-sized enterprises from corporation tax by lifting the threshold to £100,000. And we would reduce energy costs by scrapping net zero and energy levies. So we would implement a whole raft of policies that collectively would have the effect of significantly reducing the cost of living for ordinary British people, in particular the lower and middle earners. Our second broad policy platform is based upon the NHS. Now, Reform UK stands in support of the NHS. We recognise how important the NHS is to British people. So we would seek to preserve it and improve it, and we would insist that healthcare remains free at the point of delivery. But that doesn't mean that the NHS should be seen as a perfect institution that we ought to look up to as if it was a kind of religion. It needs desperately to be reformed. In the short term, we need to address the immediate problem of staff leaving. So we would give a 3-year tax break for all frontline staff, no basic rate of income tax. That would immediately serve to effectively lift their wages or their salary. So you don't need to pay them more if you tax them less. We would implement a voucher scheme. This is more of a medium-term objective. Implement a voucher scheme for patients, so that if the NHS did fail them, they could then have a voucher which would take their funding with them, and they could take that to a private hospital. Now, this is not privatisation. What it is a way of incentivising the NHS to perform treatment more quickly and more effectively. And we would end the cap on medical school places and write off student fees for all frontline staff pro rata over 10 years of service to the National Health Service. So essentially we need to bring more British people into healthcare as workers from an earlier age, so that we are not reliant on bringing in foreign labour to prop up the NHS. The third broad policy category is immigration. We would say that we need a smart immigration policy, not a mass immigration policy. In terms of legal migration, that means net zero legal immigration, so that the number of people leaving in any year is roughly the same as the number of people entering. This would allow for people to move in and out, because we are not a rigid society, but it would prevent this insane population explosion that has happened under Labour and the Tories. What has gone wrong with immigration is the failure to recognise that the more people there are pursuing a static level of services means that those services have huge pressure imposed upon them. So we look at housing, schools, healthcare, all the public services, transportation. If the amount of provision remains the same, but the demand increases massively, then you are going to inevitably put strain on those services. This is nothing to do with where the people come from. It's nothing to do with demonising them or disliking them in any way whatsoever. It is a simple and obvious point that you cannot increase the population at the rate that it's been increased, whilst not providing for schools, hospital, healthcare, roads, and such like. We have a signature or flagship policy that was announced a few weeks ago at the beginning of the election campaign. This is the employer immigration tax. It's a very simple idea that those who are employing foreign labour will have to pay a higher rate of national insurance. So it will go up from 13.8% to 20%. Now, again, this is totally compatible with our philosophy. We are not forcing people to do anything, but by changing the tax structure, you are recognising that there is a disadvantage to society when big corporations bring in foreign labour and undercut British wages by doing that. So, to compensate for this, they have to pay an increased national insurance for the foreign labour that they bring in. Now, there are two possible outcomes. One is that they decide that foreign labour is no longer cheap. They will then employ more British people, and that will improve the training and the wages of the British workers. Alternatively, they will carry on employing foreign labour. They pay the higher rate of tax. That will provide an income stream that can be used by the government to fund training schemes, apprenticeship schemes for the British workers, so that the British workers are not disadvantaged by the use of foreign labour. That is legal migration. We also have a clear policy on illegal migration, and that is perhaps simpler. We will say that there will be no more small boats in the Channel. Illegal migrants who come to the UK will be detained and deported, and if needed, migrants in small boats will be picked up and taken back to France, which we say is legal under international law, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. But to do this effectively, and the reason they can't do it now is that we are still in the European Convention of Human Rights, and that convention has been effectively brought into British law by Tony Blair's Human Rights Act. So whenever any robust approach is taken to illegal immigration, all the lawyers bubble up to the surface and with their legal aid act to frustrate the will of the British people as is expressed through our democratic government. So the European Convention on Human Rights, however well-intentioned it was, and I believe it was well-intentioned, and also those particular rights that are listed, enumerated in the European Convention, are all perfectly admirable human rights that we will all seek to uphold. That being said, what the European Convention of Human Rights has done is it has rendered British democracy subject to the views of a foreign court that is staffed by politicised judges. So we are unable to voice our preferences through our democracy when we are still subject to the European Convention on Human Rights. Now, don't be overly worried. Whenever this comes up online, there'll be a group of left-wing activists will say, oh look, Reform UK are a bunch of fascists, they want to take your rights away. It's not that at all. As I say, it's the question of being subject to the jurisdiction of a foreign court. But Reform UK's policy would be to implement a British Bill of Rights. So we would have our rights. We would have our rights, but they would be adjudicated upon under British law by British judges in Britain. How are we going to pay for this? Because you can see that we've discussed several tax cuts. We say there's a £5 saving to be had in every £100 that is spent by the government. So we would expect the government, the civil servants, to find £5 of savings in their commissions, their quangos, their departments, on the basis that this is the kind of thing that businesses have to do all the time. We would end the payment of interest on the quantitative easing reserves, the money that was printed during COVID. The Bank of England pays interest on those reserves to the big banks, and it doesn't need to. And that interest, now the interest rates have gone up, is very substantial, and we believe that would save 35 billion per annum on top of the 50 billion per annum that would be saved through cutting government waste. We'd scrap net zero and environmental levies, and we believe that would save another £30 billion per annum. And we'd halve foreign aid from 12 billion roughly to 6 billion. On the basis that it is totally ridiculous to send foreign aid to countries like China and India when they are able to run their own space program. If you can run your own space program, you don't need money from the UK. Okay, we're going to go to the good bit now, because I've picked out some other policies that I really think you're going to like. So if you want to express your approval of these policies, just feel free to express. Okay, here we go. You're going to like this one. Scrap the BBC licence fee. Yes. We're going to radically reform the House of Lords, including an immediate end of all political appointments. We're going to reform the civil service, including replacement of current civil service leaders with successful professionals from the private sector. We're going to abolish inheritance tax for all estates below £2 million so that you can pass on your house and other assets to your loved ones. We're going to introduce a patriotic curriculum in schools and ban the teaching of transgender ideology. We're going to scrap interest on student loans. I can see. Tell your kids, they'll like that. We're going to cut funding to universities that undermine free speech. We're going to increase the farming budget and defence spending. We're going to have a public inquiry into excess deaths and vaccine harms. We're going to resist the influence of the World Economic Forum. And we're going to pull out of the World Health Organization unless fundamentally reformed. We're going to reject the pandemic treaty. And the last one is the best one, but you've already had it. We're going to leave the ECHR and replace it with a British Bill of Rights. Okay, those are the policies. I was going to move on to a little discussion about myself, introduce myself to those who don't know me. Many have met me, I can see in the audience, but you don't know very much about my background. Briefly, I was born and brought up in Southport, in Birkdale. I was one of those boys that got what's called an assisted place to go to Merchant Taylors School. So I was one of those boys who got on the train every day to and from Merchant Taylors in the end of the Thatcher era, before those were phased out. I went to university in Edinburgh and then in Cambridge to do my PhD in Renaissance literature, of all things. Having done that, I was a young man and I had a bit of adventure lust still. So I just took myself off to Beijing, of all places, because I heard that China was an exciting place. I originally was going to spend 1 year there, but I spent 4 and learnt Mandarin Chinese to a reasonable level. But at that point I realised I was running out of money, and this was not a good way to live if you were not able to really provide for yourself and your future family, if you ever have one. So I came back to the UK and requalified as a lawyer, and then went back out to work in Hong Kong as a lawyer, originally as a solicitor, but it didn't suit my character. I preferred the bar, so I moved over to the bar and became a barrister. And I specialised in quite technical law, and I still do. I still practice, and my income is still 100% from this field of practice. I practice in the field of trusts and estates. It's a very technical legal area. Now, why would I then move into Reform UK? I was in Vietnam having a holiday on that magical date, we all know it, when the referendum result came through. And I was feeling like you feel when you expect Labour to win a general election. You know that feeling you had, like maybe this time a bit icky inside, because I thought that it wasn't going to work. I thought we were going to be stuck forever in the European Union. But what a surprise, what a wonderful day, and it awoke in me this great feeling of admiration for our system, that somehow, through all the propaganda and all the attempts to control and manipulate the population, through all of that, the British people had managed to come through and say what they wanted through the democratic system. And that filled me with a sense of joy. And I started watching Mr. Farage's European Parliament speeches in the evenings and in my free time, and I admired his passion and the way he spoke. So that is how I came around to Reform UK, and at one point I received an email asking if I was interested to apply, and this was more than 2 years, almost 3 years ago now. And I expressed an interest, and it all led to this. So that's me. Now, before I finish up, I just want to address one question that is raised all the time now by people who speak to me, by people on the internet, by people who email me, and I see other people discussing it. It's the question of whether or not a vote for reform is a vote for Labour. Now, I'm going to speak about Southport first of all, and then I will consider the bigger picture a bit later. So the question of Southport. If you vote for me, does that mean you're going to increase the chance of Mr. Patrick Hurley coming in for Labour? The way I see it is this. If enough people believe we can win, then we can win. So I don't say that we will win. I'm not naive. But I believe that our policies, if understood and circulated, would be widely preferred to the policies of all the other parties in Southport, and in fact across the country. So my view is, if we believe we can win, then we can win. So we shouldn't be afraid. If we are afraid, we will never win. If you are always afraid of voting for a new party like Reform, oh, we'd always better go back to Labour or Conservatives, then we will never get anywhere. So there comes a time to make a leap of faith, and this is the time. Because it's not every time when a new party suddenly appears with 610 odd candidates all ready to bring this fight to the nation. It's very unusual. It really is like the Brexit vote. It's a little bit of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Now in Southport in particular, we have a hopeless Tory MP. I like him, I've met him individually. I don't want to be disrespectful to him personally. He's a perfectly nice man. If he was my neighbour, I'd be very happy to have him as my neighbour. But I don't really think that he's suitable to be our MP. Now, he has not done enough. He has promised a whole range of things. Promised to open better train links to Manchester. He's promised to get A&E, children's A&E back to Southport. He's promised to fix the pier. And none of those things have been done. Now, perhaps he shouldn't have promised it, because a lot of those things are for Sefton Labour to do. But nevertheless, he hasn't done those things, and there's not really much that you can say that he has done. So we have a hopeless Tory MP, but we also have a left-wing vote that is split four ways in Southport this time. We have the Lib Dems, who I call the Waitrose leftists, the left-wing people who would buy their food at Waitrose. And then you have Labour, and you have an independent candidate who's really essentially a Labour candidate who was not allowed to run for Labour, so he's running on his own. And you have the Greens, who are basically, as far as I can see, the Green Party is a kind of eco-communism. I can't really distinguish it from Marxism, apart from it has some green stuff thrown in. So we have the left-wing vote split, and we have a hopeless Tory MP. So that doesn't mean that Reform will win, but it means that there's an opening there. And if enough people just did it on the day, and just they're about to tick Conservative or put a cross next to Conservative, and they realise, listen, I can't keep doing this, it's madness to keep doing this, and then they put it next to Reform, and if enough people do that, then we can win. And the polls, we read the polls all the time. I begin to think that the polls are used as much to manipulate people as they are to report accurately the true situation. I believe that the polls at the moment are not reflecting the true interest in Reform UK. All our candidates are saying the same thing. Now, whether we win or not, but we're all getting a huge upsurge in interest. I mean, you just leave your computer for 20 minutes and you'll have 10 emails around. It can happen like that. And people are wanting to know all about you all of a sudden. So there's a huge uptick of interest in Reform, and it's not being reflected in those polls. And I believe that the polls are being used to influence us, and they're being used to again instill in us a sense of hopelessness. Look, Reform UK's here, but they can't win. They can't win, so just give up and go back and vote Tory. So that's the problem with the polls. But the ultimate point, and this is what I have to come back to when people ask me about whether a vote for Reform is a vote for Labour, the ultimate point is that when you vote Tory, or if you voted Tory in the last 14 years, you have inadvertently been voting for Labour policies. So in fact, a vote for the Conservative Party is not really a vote for Conservative policies or Conservative people. They have shown that over 14 years. So it doesn't really matter. This is the time to make your leap of faith and have a go with a new option. Finally then, what is our goal? Our goal is to get a cohort of MPs into Parliament on this occasion. How many we get, we can't predict. We don't know what the upper limit is. But we would expect to have some, and certainly at least one from Clacton. But even one from Clacton would change things. But we would expect and hope many more than that. And our plan is not just for this election, it's for the next election too, which may or may not be 5 years from now, it could be 5 years we would expect. 2029, and in 2029 we will be well known. We will have teams of supporters who are ready, not like this time. The supporters came 4 weeks before the election. We've got great supporters here who've been very, very helpful, but we haven't been able to organise it in a way that we will have organised it 3 or 4 or 5 years from now. So at that point, everyone will know about Reform, we'll be highly organised, unlike what we are now, frankly, and we'll be ready to really not just win seats, but potentially win the election and have a Reform government. It's not impossible. It's only really impossible if you think it's impossible. If you believe we can do it, enough ordinary British people believe we can do it, then we can do it. Thank you very much for listening to me. That is all I have to say. I'm happy to take questions now individually, or I'm happy to also just move on and let Nick come on the stage if he wishes.